Record. All right, so we are going to go ahead and jump in with our next Town Hall Zoom. This time it is about three really fun topics that I'm excited to get into: weightlifting, dryland, and multi-sport athletes, and how all of that pertains to our team and the swimmers on our team. And these are cool things because they kind of all play together. I think each one of them could probably be its own slideshow to talk about weightlifting and dryland and multi-sport athletes, but they also play into each other, as you'll see and as we go here today. So as always, I'm going to start with an overview. And the first thing we'll just discuss is what exactly is dryland and what's happening at dryland. Then we'll go into ABSC's approach to it. We'll talk through weightlifting and swimming and the relationship between those two things and how they fit together, and which ABSC groups actually lift weights and when athletes should start lifting weights. From there, we will go into talking about multi-sport athletes. You'll see sort of the relationship between weightlifting, dryland, and kids playing other sports, because especially like late middle school and high school, a lot of these other sports will have kids lifting weights for their team that they're on, for the other sport they're playing. So then we'll go into which sports go best with swimming for kids who are multi-sport athletes. We'll talk about specialization, which is sort of a hot button topic when it comes to youth sports in general. And should an athlete specialize? And if so, what age should they specialize in a certain sport? Which, if you're not familiar with the lingo, it just means picking one sport and doing only that sport, specialization. And finally, we'll talk about ABSC's practice options for multi-sport athletes. So let's jump right in. First things first, the classic question: what is dryland, and what would this presentation be without a pun/dad joke from Coach Mike? This is your dryland right here, the Sahara Desert, and that will conclude my TED Talk for today. But all joking aside, I think this is probably what a lot of people think when they envision dryland, what in the world has taken place. And the truth of the matter is, it's swimming lingo. And if you were not a swimmer yourself, you probably had to learn secondhand from your athlete what dryland was. I remember trying to explain to my mom what it was. And if you were just to say, out in a group of people, if you're in Publix or something like that, and we're to say to a group of people, hey, let's do dryland, the only people who would actually know what you're talking about would be people who at some point in time were swimmers. So what exactly it is pretty open-ended. And it's funny. It's one of those things where like every swimmer knows what you mean when you say dryland, but it doesn't really have a strict definition. So to kind of try to boil it down a little bit, basically, it's any non-swimming physical activity. So our kids are semi-aquatic beasts that we train. And so whenever they're doing the non-aquatic part of their physical enhancement, that will be dryland. So it could be cardio exercise, it could be body weight calisthenics, it could be weights or resistance training of some kind, and it could even be like stretching and yoga and some sort of flexibility training. And ideally, dryland, whatever you're doing for dryland, ideally it would help build strength for the athletes, it would help build coordination, and would help build basic movement skills. A term that I heard recently that I really like is you want kids to have a quote unquote movement vocabulary and be able to just move fluidly when they're put in different positions. So I like that, having a movement vocabulary. I think that's a helpful way to think about what we're trying to do at dryland. And so dryland has always been a part of swimming, but it's been a big trend in the sport the last 5 or 10 years to really emphasize dryland and make it sort of a core part of what your program does. And some of the motivation behind that is what's going on in schools now. And I'm not going to be that guy that, talks about schools these days and complains about them too much. But I will say it's scientifically, or not scientifically, but there's data that suggests that schools across the country are cutting down PE time and doing away with recess time for little kids, which is just a super silly thing in my opinion, because kids need to play and they need to express express their body physically, like moving through space, even just doing monkey bars or climbing up the little playscape and going down the slide. Stuff like that helps kids build basic movement, vocabulary, and athleticism. And so having that free time to play is super important. And if we can't rely on schools to necessarily provide that, then you would think, well, okay, well, kids should be able to play at home. But the other problem is we live in the 21st century and technology is a big thing now. And there's more data that suggests that kids are playing outside less than ever because they're getting more and more screen time than ever. And so USA Swimming has actually been sort of kind of pushing and promoting the narrative that a lot of the kids now who sign up for swimming, or just kids in general, are generally less athletic kind of across the board than they were even a generation ago. And so maybe 20 years ago, a kid would walk onto your, if you have a group of 10 kids on your pool deck, maybe 7 out of those 10 are pretty, basically have basic athleticism going for them. Now it's probably more like 3 or 4 out of 10 walk on your pool deck and have some basic athleticism going for them. So we as the swim club and swim clubs across the country sort of see it as our own job now to try to not only help them become better swimmers, but to help them be more athletic in general so that they can be better swimmers, but also just so they can be healthy, because it's a really important part of being healthy. So ABSC specifically, the way we approach Dryland is that every group does it. And for those that have been on ABSC longer than 1 year and have had young kids come up through the program, that hasn't always been the case. In fact, this is actually the first year in ABSC history that every single group does Dryland on a regular basis. Like it's planned out in the practice schedule for all groups, from all the groups in our core program, from GUPs to pups to super pups to dogs to the senior groups. They all do Dryland now starting this year. And so we plan to actually sort of continue to incorporate Dryland more and more over time. Long term, I would love to get to where my super pups are doing it every single day. If I could get to where super pups were doing Dryland 5 days a week, I would be really happy. I don't know exactly what that looks like, because I'm also trying to weigh the pros and cons of the amount of time kids spend at practice, and I don't want to increase their practice time longer than an hour and a half. So I'm really trying to figure out how I can get more Dryland. Maybe it means cutting out a little bit of swim time and being more intentional with the swim time we have. I'm not sure, but I know it's important, and I know I want to incorporate more of it over time. So the focus when it comes to Dryland and ABSC is we want to develop core strength and flexibility, and in general, things that will translate well to kids swimming fast. So if it will help them move faster through water, we're going to try to train those things on the land as well. And really, if you could pick 2 things as a parent to try to help your kid get better at swimming, try to help them develop core strength and flexibility. Those 2 things will go just such a long way. And specifically with core strength, if you can get rotational core strength, like freestyle and backstroke, how they rotate from side to side, if you can do like, basic rotational exercises like Russian twists or something like that to develop side to side core strength, that's really good. And for breaststroke and butterfly, you want more of the hinge or the roll motion with your core strength. So that's more like doing like the Superman or banana plank position type things would help with that. There's a lot of things that can help with that, and maybe I can list that out in future presentations. But core strength is huge, flexibility is huge, particularly ankle flexibility and shoulder flexibility, because those are 2 of the joints that get worked the most in swimmers, would be ankles and shoulders. And that's also where you see ankles, shoulders, and knees is where swimming is a low injury sport, but if there are injuries, it often tends to be in ankles, shoulders, and knees. So strengthening and increasing flexibility in the muscles around those joints is really a good thing to do. As swimmers get older, we're going to focus more on resistance training, whether that be using stretch cords and mini bands or throwing a medicine ball back and forth, things like that, to even weightlifting as a form of resistance training. So that happens more and more as swimmers get older. I think this year, my super pups, we have a small group of medicine balls out at the Georgia Aquatic Center that we've really just started using them, and we'll probably use them more over time. We also use Dryland time for non-strength and coordination stuff. Sometimes we'll use it for group meetings. I like to go over meet results with my swimmers, and I'll go name by name through the meet results and pick like their best event and say, oh, so-and-so did a really amazing job on the 100 fly at at the last swim meet, they drop 5 seconds and then the rest of the group will clap for them. So we'll do stuff like that at Dryland time. We'll also use it for games and for team building activities from time to time, because we got to keep the morale up. You got to do some fun stuff every now and again. And Dryland is a good thing, for that. And in general, if we can teach kids to move the right way when they're young, it will prevent injuries for them later on. So that is a huge goal, is just create use that term I used earlier, movement vocabulary for kids when they are young. So by just a quick overview, group by group, for what we do in Dryland, Gups and Pups it's only 15 minutes for those groups. And really some of the main focus is just teaching them how to do Dryland and then go swim, or swim and then go do Dryland, transition from one to the other. Sounds silly, but it takes time and they've got to learn how to do it. But also Gups and Pups are going to learn some basic warm-up exercises, such as like jumping jacks and running with high knees and stuff like that, and some what we call level 1 movements. So that would be an example of a level 1 movement would be doing a proper plank. Or one I love to do with Gups and Pups is I have them stand on 2 feet and then jump and land on 1 foot, and then jump and land on 2 feet again. Just basic gait, coordination, posture, movement type exercises at Dryland are really, really foundational for Gups and Pups. And just full transparency with y'all, I'm still learning about all this. Like, Dryland is not my first love or my first knowledge when it comes to swimming. So the more I learn, and I plan to keep investing in it, the more I want to give back to it as well. With the Super Pups, we're going to take some time and teach them a dynamic warm-up routine that most of them probably know by now. And it's sort of a warm-up to swim type routine that they could even do before a swim meet or something like that. It has to do like with some skips and some jogs and some arm swings and some lunges and some high kicks, just basic stuff to get their heart rate up, get their body moving, get them moving back and forth, so that when they dive into the pool at practice, they're not diving in completely tight and stiff and cold. They've actually warmed up their body before they get in the water. And since I started doing these dynamic warm-up stuff, I've had less injuries in the Super Pups than I've ever had before. It's been awesome. So I plan to keep incorporating more and more of that over time as well, because it is injury prevention. We'll also do a lot of running and cardio in the Super Pups, because a big goal of that group is to help those swimmers become more aerobically capable. And I misspelled it there, but level 2 exercises. So a level 2 exercise is easy to compare to a level 1. If level 1 is doing a plank, then level 2 would be doing a push-up, down and up, some sort of dynamic movement to go along with the basic exercise. Another example of level 2 exercises would be instead of doing squats, doing a squat jump, or instead of doing a plank, doing a half burpee, for example. Those are level 2 movements that we'll learn in the Super Pups. The dogs, the Senior 2 and the Senior Flex, are similar to the Super Pups, but typically they'll do more reps of whatever the activity is, and it's more intense. So they're going to really get their heart rate up during Dryland in those groups. They'll be red in the face and breathing heavy. And by the time they hit the pool, they're like begging for the water to be cold, because it'll help their body feel a little cooler after the hard work that they've put in at Dryland. And a lot more resistance training as well. And actually starting, I think they may have started last year, but definitely this year, our Senior 1 group now lifts weights at a local gym called Georgia Strength. And I don't know that the whole group does it. I think a couple of them may just lift weights at school with their weight training coach, but I know a sizable portion of the group will go to Georgia Strength together before practice a couple times a week and do some weightlifting as a group. And I think Coach Adam joins in, which is good, because he needs it. So take that, Coach Adam. So weightlifting and swimming. This is Caleb Dressel right here. He is one of the fastest swimmers on planet Earth. He's an American swimmer, and he kind of got famous not just for being really good, but because he's a lot more ripped and jacked than most swimmers typically are. And so I remember a lot of discussion going on in the swimming community at the last Olympics, because Caleb Dressel was so much bigger than most of the other swimmers, and he was winning gold medals doing it. And so it sparked a whole debate about, well, should there be a lot more weightlifting in swimming? I mean, clearly it's working for Caleb Dressel, so why shouldn't all swimmers be lifting weights? And I think it's a good question. So historically, should swimmers lift weights? The answer to that was actually probably no. Like, a lot of old school coaches would probably tell you that weightlifting is not great. Like 30, 40, 50 years ago, weight training was pretty frowned upon. in swimming unless they were in college, 18 and older, especially if they were a pro swimmer. If they were like 23, 24, 25, professional swimmer, weight training a little bit more acceptable. High school kid, probably not. Times have changed now where people are a lot more open-minded when it comes to weight training and swimming. And so now most of the good clubs that I know with fast swimmers have their high school kids lifting weights. And it's done very precisely, which I'll get into in a second, but it is happening to an extent. And so that kind of leads to my next point there is, yes, it's happening, but with caution, because if you've got adolescent kids, if you've got, 14 and unders lifting weights with underdeveloped bodies, and they're just trying to get out there and bench press as much as they possibly can, you're asking for trouble there. You're asking for injuries, you're asking for loss of flexibility, you're asking for muscle imbalance, you're asking for, in some cases, just overall stunted potential if you start lifting weights too early. It has a lot of potential downsides for swimmers, a lot of upside as well. And that's why, so why bother lifting weights at all? Because like I said, there's some teams in the state of Georgia even right now, some really good clubs that are breaking national records and things like that for their 15, 16, and 17, 18 age groups, and all those clubs are lifting weights. And so that's why, because it helps people get faster. And on top of that, it's fun and it's healthy, it's good for you, and it's creative. It helps mix up the way swimming can be a little bit monotonous sometimes, so it mixes up the way that we interact with the sport. I know our senior one group, they really have enjoyed the weightlifting that they're doing now. So I definitely see the benefits of it. Now, if you ask them the day after they just did some heavy lifting, they might not tell you they love it. But in general, I think they like the weightlifting and are glad we're doing it. So here are just some basic general rules of thumb when it comes to swimmers and weightlifting. Again, these are rules of thumb. These are heuristics. They're not hard and fast laws of nature and science. They're just some recommendations from good old Coach Mike to help you not screw things up by lifting weights. So number one, you should avoid going heavy unless you're in college. And even then, a lot of college swimmers, especially distance swimmers, probably need to avoid heavy weights. In general, you want lightweight, high rep if you're lifting. So maybe you can bench press 250 pounds, but you should probably do 100 and do a whole lot more reps of it than you should do 250, because that's going to be better for you when it comes to your swimming potential. Because if you put on too much mass, if you get too big, you're not going to be that fast in the water. That's a problem. Some other ones for some other rules of thumb for weightlifting would be, if you can't quote unquote make the shape with just your body weight, then don't touch an actual weight set. And what I mean by make the shape is if you can't perform the motion with proper technique without doing something that's going to get you injured. For example, you shouldn't be squatting with a squat rack and putting weights on the bar if you can't do a regular body weight squat. If you can't do a proper body weight squat, you're just going to injure yourself as soon as you put weights on the bar. And that's not just for swimming. I mean, that goes for athletes in general. You need to be really careful with weightlifting and incorrect motions. But some other, to kind of talk about it more in terms of age range and development, if a swimmer is pre-puberty, they really shouldn't be messing with weights like that. If they are post-puberty, they should probably, that's an okay time to introduce some really, really lightweight and some minimal resistance, like resistance bands and stretch cords and things like that. Like if they've just gone through puberty a year or two ago, then maybe they can start doing some very, very light weight training and resistance. And if they are getting kind of late into high school, maybe a sophomore, junior, senior, then you could probably start some real weight tongue twister, real weight training, assuming you've got actual supervision and guidance from your coaching staff in doing so. Or, better yet, better than Coach Mike, maybe a real strength and conditioning coach. So how does this all tie into multi-sport athletes? So when it comes to multi-sport athletes, a lot of other sports incorporate weight training into their programming, or even require weight training in their programming. And so it's something that if your kid plays more than just swimming, if they have another sport besides swimming, they're probably going to bump into weight training. Plus, most parents, a lot of parents were not swimmers themselves and maybe played other sports growing up. Maybe you played basketball or track or soccer or football or whatever it is, and weight training was a part of what you did for your sport. So why wouldn't it be a part of what your child does for their sport, even if they're a swimmer, right? So what I'll say about, if let's say your kid plays basketball and the coach wants them lifting weights, hopefully they are being guided by their coaches and it's done in a healthy way. If not, they probably need to just not do that sport anymore, right? I mean, that's not just me giving you swimming advice. That's if the coach isn't supervising their weight training well and giving them a plan for it, they should probably avoid it, maybe avoid that sport. If it directly hurts their swimming, then it's probably best in the long run to either quit the other sport that is asking you to do weight training, or quit swimming, or prioritize one sport over the other. Let's see if I can get this bar out of the way. There we go. And just be okay with the diminished results that you get by prioritizing one or the other. For example, if you're a football player, the coach needs you to get big and lift weights. That's probably going to directly hurt your swimming. If you want to keep doing both sports, you probably need to pick one to be your most important sport. And so let's say you choose football. The fact that you're lifting that heavy weight will probably diminish your results in the pool as a swimmer, and you've got to be okay with it because you made that choice, right? It doesn't mean you have to quit swimming altogether. It just means that you need to understand what you're signing up for as a swimmer when you do that. Let's see, next one here. So which sports then go best with swimming? So we at ABSC do encourage multi-sport athletes. We think, and I'll get into that in a second, I think, but we believe that that your swimmers shouldn't be only swimmers from the time that they are super young. Hopefully they've played some other sports along the way, or will at least try some other sports along the way. And I'm just thinking in terms of high school sports for a minute. Here's what goes best with swimming. Track goes well with swimming. XC, which is cross country, goes well with swimming. Wrestling goes well with swimming as long as you're not in the heavyweight division. Gymnastics goes well with swimming. Think about it, sports that and soccer, right? Sports that either develop your stamina or develop your flexibility and strength, your weight to power ratio, like gymnastics and wrestling. They're going to make you really powerful relative to your weight. That's going to help your swimming. I should have added rock climbing. Rock climbing and Ninja Warrior gyms are amazing training for swimming, by the way. I should have added that in. Golf, cheerleading, flag football, and tennis, probably indifferent. I should have added tennis on there, probably indifferent. Don't really help or hurt that much. Baseball and basketball, swimming probably helps those sports more than they help swimming. There was a lot of baseball players on my high school swim team because they wanted to strengthen their shoulders for baseball. So they're like, let's be swimmers. And the baseball coach loved it because it worked. I would say football, or I actually don't know that much about lacrosse. So I could be wrong here, but I get the impression that it's good to be big in lacrosse. Maybe hockey, anything that requires you to accumulate mass and get really, really big relative to your body type is probably not great for swimming. You don't want to have a whole bunch of extra mass when you're a swimmer. That's not going to help you hit your potential. Some mass good, a lot of extra mass bad. So when it comes to specialization, what age is best for specializing in swimming, if at all? And the truth of the matter is, swimming is a more demanding sport than other sports sometimes, depending on how you engage with it. It's true that if you pour a lot of hours into swimming at a younger age, you'll probably get good at it faster. It's just the honest truth of the situation. And so when you start getting into like the super pups, the dogs, the seniors, by that point, you're putting in a pretty good number of hours per week into the sport, and it gets a little tough to play other sports. We do encourage swimmers to play multiple sports through middle school, and to an extent in high school, some as well. Multi-sport athletes, it's actually good for your ceiling to be a multi-sport athlete. We've just developing that. It's kind of like Dryland, right? It develops your athleticism as a whole, and it helps keep you mentally fresh and things like that. So it's not a bad thing to be a multi-sport athlete. I would love for our multi-sport athletes to commit to swimming like January through April so that they can be ready for state and divisionals and not miss those big meets. But I understand if you're a soccer player or a baseball player and you play a spring sport, it is what it is. I'm not going to make you quit the sport you love. Once high school begins, a swimmer should probably, in general, again, I'm speaking in generalities here. I don't want to paint hard and fast rules, but a swimmer should probably generally cut down to maybe swimming in one other sport. If they're like an 8th grader or a 9th grader, maybe they run cross country or play volleyball in the fall. And then once that's over, they commit more to swimming. We had a couple swimmers actually have really good meets this past weekend at the Classic City meet. And they were swimmers who had played other sports throughout the fall. And they did not do as well early in the fall because they were missing a lot of practice for their other sport. But that sport ended in November, so they've had several weeks of good training leading up to Classic City Quad. And then they just knocked it out of the park at Classic City Quad because they focused on swimming again, right? And if we're thinking big picture here, that's a good thing. That's fine. It's okay that those meets in October and September were not as good because they were playing the other sports. It's okay that happened because they ultimately ended up, when they came back and committed to swimming, they still had a really good performance at the Classic City. They're still on track to be great swimmers, to be college athletes if they want to be. Nothing is off the rails, big picture. Short term, did the other sports hurt their performance a little bit? Yeah, it did short term, but it's clearly not messed them up long term. So that's a good thing. And so if I would say by the time a swimmer is a sophomore or a junior, if they're trying to go Division I or Division II and swim at a really big time swim program, they probably need to be pretty specialized by that point in time. I mean, there's exceptions to everything, don't get me wrong, but they probably need to be mostly swimmers at that point in time. If they aren't necessarily sold on swimming Division I, for example, if they want to, maybe they'd be okay going Division III or NAIA or one of those levels of swimming. Then they don't necessarily have to go into the route of being Senior I, because it's really hard to be a multi-sport athlete and be in Senior I. And so what they could do instead is go into the Senior II group or the Senior Flex group. So the Senior II group is less demanding than Senior I. It's for high school age kids who are good at swimming, who care about swimming, who want to do hard workouts and want to be good swimmers, but can't quite commit the amount of time and are still sort of, I would say Senior II is good for swimmers who either are still trying to get to the level of being able to do the Senior I practices or don't want to commit the hours that it would take to get to Senior I practices. So we have several multi-sport athletes in Senior II. And then Senior Flex, I would say almost the whole group of Senior Flex kids is multi-sport athletes. Almost all of them play another sport or are really involved in musical theater or really involved with something at their church or a club they're in at school, or they're just, spending lots of hours on schoolwork or whatever it is, or many of the above, right? That's kind of what Senior Flex exists for, is the kids who like swimming and they want to be good members of their high school and summer league team, but want to practice 3 times a week and call it good. Senior II is a lot more rigorous than Senior Flex. Senior II is like, you can move into Senior I if you're in the Senior II group. That's still a high quality group, but not quite as rigorous as Senior I. I hope that's all making sense. I've kind of talked about that sort of thing on a different video before, but that's why we have those different groups and why multi-sport athletes, instead of just quitting swimming altogether, if they want to keep playing other sports or doing other activities, they should definitely look at Senior II or Senior Flex. And from a coaching perspective, and this is the last thing before we jump into some Q&A, if anybody has any questions for me, because there's definitely a lot of questions around this topic. So if you've got any questions at all, I'm happy to answer them. You can type them in the chat. We'll get to that in a second. But before we jump into the Q&A here, I'll just round it out by saying, I've seen every animal in the zoo, to steal a phrase from Coach Harvey. I've seen kids that were lifelong swimmers that never wanted to give up their other sport. And I've seen kids that focus solely on swimming, and I've seen all of the above be exceptional athletes and exceptional swimmers. And as long as we get to keep engaging with them and keep them on our team, we're pretty happy, whether it be Senior I, Senior II, Senior Flex, we're pretty happy no matter what group they end up in, as long as we get to keep maintaining those relationships with those swimmers. I forgot to give my 2 examples here. I'll give them really fast. We had a kid on ABSC who graduated last year. She's a freshman at Georgia now. Her name is Lauren Massey. And she was in the pups and then the supers and then the dogs. And eventually she ended up going the route of Senior II, because along with being a swimmer, she was also a basketball player, started for Commerce High School. She was one of the best pole vaulters in the region. one or two other sports that Lauren Massey did, and she went that route because she didn't want to give up those other sports. So she went into senior two, and she kind of made it work with swimming the best that she could. And Lauren is perfectly happy. She's at Georgia now, and she was a 25-second 50 freestyler and a state finalist freestyler for Commerce High School, even though she played all those other sports. And another example of that is a kid named William Suber, who ironically I think also went to Commerce, but or one of those schools up that way, but he was a football player. And he was one of those kids that decided he wasn't going to give up swimming or football, which is pretty funny because he was an offensive lineman on the football team, but also a swimmer. And he managed to do both. He would bulk up really big in the fall, and then football season would end in December, and he would come back and get into swimming shape. And William was an awesome kid. He actually went on to play college football, but he kept swimming his whole time with ABSC. And I was just so happy to have that relationship with both William and Lauren. And those are just some of a few examples I have. So hopefully this was helpful for y'all. I know it's sort of a quick breeze through when it comes to Dryland and weights and all the above, but if you would, it looks like some questions are starting to come in. So I will try to answer those really quick. I'm going to stop my screen share here and answer these. So first one, it says, is there going to be Dryland at Ramsey? So back before we had, so ABSC's only had the Georgia Aquatic Center since COVID. This is our third year in the Georgia Aquatic Center. And we used to do all of our Dryland at Ramsey. We now do not do any Dryland at Ramsey because we have the YWCO and the Georgia Aquatic Center. We try to do all of our Dryland, and Summerhill. We try to do all our Dryland at those facilities. YWCO has a little room we can use. GAC has those courts we can use. Summerhill has a weight room we can use, or like a little exercise room, I should say. We don't lift weights there. We do exercises there. To answer the question specifically, will there be Dryland at Ramsey? I think there will need to be some sort of Dryland at Ramsey in the future, like with my Super Pups, for example. It would probably only be 10 or 15 minutes, probably just warm up to swim, but I would love to do some sort of Dryland at Ramsey. Another question is, what do you consider minimal weight? So that's a great question, and it's completely relative to whatever swimmer we're talking about. So if it's a 13-year-old boy, minimal weight would, if he's bench pressing or squatting or something, it's probably just the bar, right? Maybe not even putting weight on the bar, just about as light as you can possibly go. The lighter, the better, really. If you're doing like bicep curls or something like that, I mean, which is not really a great swimming exercise, but just for example's sake, if you're doing bicep curls, you would want to do a whole bunch of reps with a 5-pound weight, 30 reps with a 5-pound weight instead of doing maxing out with a 50-pound weight or something like that. The lighter, the better, would be minimal weight. I'm sorry, that's not a great answer, but it really is sort of relative. I would say body weight exercises are amazing. The more time people spend doing body weight exercises to get the motion right is a good thing. And then we'll sort of take it case by case. Are they a boy or a girl? How old are they? How long have they been lifting weights? And that kind of defines what minimal weight would be. Another one would be, do you do post-swim stretching? What stretches do you recommend? At the club, we don't typically get out and stretch as a group, but that is a fantastic idea and possibly something we could consider. Because actually I like dynamic movements and dynamic warm-up before getting in the water. I like stretching after the practice has been completed. So typically most days we'll swim the practice, the kids will do a cool down, and I'm talking Super Pups and up here. The kids will do a cool down, like 100 easy choice, 200 easy, 300, something like that, and then get out and go on their way. But stretching after practice is a good idea. If we don't do it as a group, it's always a good thing to do when kids get home and do before bed, that sort of thing. What stretches do I recommend? Anything with ankle flexibility. The more flexible you can make your ankles and shoulders, the better. My coach told me, because I was trying to get better at breaststroke kick, my coach told me growing up to practice spelling the alphabet with my feet at night, like just lift my foot off the ground and spell the alphabet with my feet. And that would help stretch my ankles out. Something like that is incredible. Another example would be, could you give us some good Dryland workout options that the kids can do over winter break if we are out of town and not in an indoor pool? Yeah, that's a great one. I have a document I've shared with people in the past, so I will maybe just distribute that sort of group by group to the groups that I coach and really by request. But yeah, definitely. The more time you spend on stretching and core exercises, particularly side-to-side core exercises, the better. Another question is which food to eat before the morning of a meet, during a meet, after meet. So we're actually going to do a future one of these. I think our next one of these town hall meetings will be about nutrition and sleep and hydration. So I'll save most of that for that. But I would say there's people always like to tell athletes to load up on carbohydrates and do a big carb load before a swim meet. Be careful with that, because if you eat too many carbs, especially like really dense carbs, like a whole bunch of bagels or something, sometimes that can actually kind of sit on your stomach. So, and kind of weigh you down a little bit, keep you a little heavy. So I would say probably, I mean, you really can't go wrong with carbohydrates from vegetables. That's a good thing to do. Some light proteins like eggs or white meat or fish. That's like exceptional to eat before a meet. And some carbs, not a whole bunch of carbs. You don't want to go crazy on the carbs. Some carbs is good. Let's see what else. I think there was something else. I think that's about all I got for now. Looks like I've got about 1 minute left on my Zoom time here. So if anybody else has any Hail Mary questions to fire in the chat here, go for it. As always, I'm going to post this video, especially since I remembered to record it this time, and post the PowerPoint presentation, and I'll email that out to everybody. We've got a YouTube channel going with all of these up here, and I'll send the PowerPoint so you can look it over. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And thank you guys for being here. Fun topic. I enjoyed doing it. We'll hang on for just another second or two. I'll probably stop recording here.